I'm glad more developers are putting out demos. I think they're the best way to showcase a game, because they give us an idea of what to expect from the final product. This is just a tangent, but you should check out the Lies of P demo if you're a Souls fan. It's got a surprising amount of content in it. 23 gigs gets you 2 boss fights, a hunter duel, and a big chunk of the starting area. Souls-like gets thrown around a lot, but I think Lies of P has 2 important things that earn that Steam tag. The character models have the high-res PS3 era art style that FromSoft's maintained all the way up to Elden Ring. A lot of people think that's a limitation, but I think it's part of the charm of a Souls game because it gives a setting a dreamlike quality where your character isn't really reacting to the situation like a normal person would, but they're being controlled subconsciously through forces beyond their comprehension. That's a metaphor for you, the player. Also, the level design works in concert with enemy placement, so you get these ambush scenarios that do more to evoke Bloodborne's vibe than the jolly old England setting. Or these goofy sights like Dick Van Dyke chimney sweeps hanging on ledges as they wait to ambush you. The devs understand that, even though your character may look goofy for not making proper contact as he runs along really tight ledges, it adds a level of anxiety to the player in thinking that they might walk off the ledge if they're not being mindful of their movement. But I'll leave the more in-depth analysis on the game to Souls heads. Instead, I want to cover 2 demos I played over the past week because they stood out to me for their style and subject matter. En Garde is an upcoming third-person action game by Fireplace Games. You play as Adalia de Volador, a sword fighter who takes up arms against a local corrupt government. Adalia meets a mysterious figure known as El Vigilante, who taunts Adalia by taking her sword and egging her on to pursue him. Not one to back down from a challenge, Adalia hotfoots it after the masked hombre. Let's not beat around the bush. This is a Zorro simulator. You fight guards with your fencing, and use environmental objects to even the odds. You've got a basic sword combo, you can parry blue attacks, and you have to dodge red attacks. During combat, Adalia auto-targets nearby enemies, and snaps to the closest one. You can change the direction of your sword swipes with the left stick, in case you want to move from the enemy you're facing to the enemy that's flanking you. If you need some breathing room, you can break contact by holding the sprint button. The action button lets you read text and open doors, but more importantly, it lets you pick up nearby objects to use against the enemies. Hucking a bucket on a guard will leave them exposed for free hits. Some objects can only work in environmental hazards. Hucking a lantern at a cannon will cause it to fire, which can take out a whole group, and throwing bombs at a fire pit will stun nearby enemies. Adalia can also kick enemies, but the stronger soldier types won't be pushed around so easily. You have to stun them by kicking a crate or barrel at them before they can be knocked about. The fun thing about En Garde is that I can spot the inspiration for various elements of the game. Adalia's outfit and the level design during platform challenges are very clearly based on Assassin's Creed, namely the Ezio games. Surprisingly, the way enemies behave take a page from Sekiro's playbook. Each enemy has 2 bars over their heads, one for health and the other for stamina. Basic guards go down relatively easily, but you gotta wear down the soldiers with your sword fighting. Parrying their attacks leaves them open for your attacks or your kicks. Soldiers have 2 levels of health, and much like Sekiro enemies, they're indicated by pips over their health bars. The demo has 2 modes, Tutorial and Arena. The tutorial is what you expect it to be, and flows rather naturally. You learn to attack with a sword on training dummies, then you fight basic guards, then soldiers, then you learn how to kick guards off of ledges or into weapon racks.
Don't mess with me, I have an arsenal at my back.
Thanks for the tip.
Then you add the crates and barrels to stun the soldiers, and so on. Once you get the basics down, you learn how to move through an arena to deal with multiple enemies. Along with crates and barrels, you can kick tables to knock off any enemies standing on them, or stun any enemies who are standing next to them. The final fight is with El Vigilante himself, plus some extra enemies he convinced to fight alongside him to help with your training.
Oh, there you are. I thought you were coming out from the other side and I put some decoration for you and everything, but really, it's fine. And now it is time for the final trial. Prepare to finally face El Vigilante, the poet of valor and his verses of skill.
Steel yourself versus my Valor poet and face your trials finale.
Remember, your brother gave you strict instructions not to harm me.
The tone of the game is light and cartoony. The writing doesn't take itself too seriously, but it knows how to ride that line when it comes to not being too self-aware. The art style dovetails with the writing, and I like the game's use of vibrant colors. Reminds me of Encanto. But don't assume this game is for kids just because it looks like a cartoon. The enemies can and will swarm you, and you can get wombo comboed fairly easily if your rhythm is off. Adalia has a decent amount of health, which fully recovers at the end of each fight. When she does go down, the game does that Prince of Persia Sands of Time bit I like, where Adalia claims,
Momentary setback.
"Here's some tips I can offer after giving the game a handful of attempts. Parry as soon as you see the attack flash blue. At first, I thought there was going to be some kind of perfect parry mechanic where I had to wait for the sword flash to reach the blade's tip, but that caused me to eat a hit. Listen for the sound that indicates that an attack is unblockable.
Stop dancing around!
Usually, enemies only do red attacks when they're supporting their friends, so the most consistent way to avoid red attacks is to avoid fighting multiple enemies at once. Run away, kick some crates towards them, bonk them with throwables, do whatever you can to keep each fight one-on-one. That said, stronger enemies like El Vigilante will use red attacks even if they're by themselves, so you still can't spam parry when you see him raise his sword. This game's got a lot of potential. The arena introduces another strong enemy that requires a bit more effort to take down compared to guards and soldiers, but if you keep moving around and use the environments to help you out, they'll go down like everyone else. Try out En Garde's demo on Steam if you're down to Zoro. The other game I want to talk about is Jusant. Don't Nod keeps surprising me. It'd be so easy to pin them as a Life is Strange team, but then you look at their catalog and find out they made stuff like Vampire, which I was planning to cover at some point, but it ended up being a lot denser than I previously assumed. During the Xbox showcase, Don't Nod revealed the trailer for their latest game, Jusant. It's an exploration game with a focus on rock climbing. Before you start the game, it explains the meaning behind its title. Jusant is a French term for low tide. Well, it can't get any lower than this because I don't see any body of water around. Your goal is to scale what I'll describe generously as the mountain. A friend said they'd be interested in the game if it was to rock climbing, but Death Stranding was to walking simulators. And yeah, that hit the nail on the head. When you approach a climbable surface, you automatically attach a climbing rope to the nearby anchor point. Then you have to alternate pulling the left and right triggers to grab onto handholds. You reach out for the nearest grip with left stick, and then pull either trigger to climb. If a grip is too far to reach normally, you can hold A to charge a jump, and release it to leap towards the grip. At any point, you can attach a crampon onto the rock wall with X. From what I could tell, you can only have a max number of 4 anchor points at any given time. If you lose your grip or miss a jump, these anchor points prevent you from falling to your death, and losing any progress from the mistake. Not surprisingly, you have a grip meter that reflects your stamina as you climb. You can recover your stamina by not climbing and pressing in the left stick. Do note that doing any jumping lowers a cap on your stamina until you reach the next platform and fully recover. Sometimes you have to lower yourself. If your rope is attached to an anchor point, you can climb down and press left bumper to rappel downwards, or right bumper to pull yourself back up. Sometimes you have to lower yourself so you have more slack on the rope to do wall runs. This lets you reach areas adjacent to the rock wall but don't have any climbable parts. You can also throw your rope against grapple points to yank down bridges or swing across gaps. When you're done with the climb, you retract your rope by pressing B. And that's the game. You're always looking for where to go and how to get there. I like these kinds of puzzle platformers. The puzzle solving goes hand in hand with exploration, and it incentivizes you to look around and figure out the solution, but it's never too obtuse when it comes to figuring out where to go and how to get there. The game's mostly quiet and relies on the sound of the wind passing through the mountain walls to provide atmosphere. There's no spoken dialogue. The closest analog would be Journey, but even Journey had moments where you'd run into other travelers. I think this is going to be a solo run for the entire game. You can find journals and messages from other people, and they paint a picture of what life was like when the water was still here. It's never outright stated, but you can infer from the dead coral and the game's title that this place used to be underwater. What happened to the water is anyone's guess, but once you reach the top of this lighthouse, you can catch a glimpse of why we're doing all of this in the first place. This game caught my eye. Depending on your mindset, you might be turned off by its looks and assume it's an arty-farty game, but the art style's purpose is to make it easy for the player to look at a given space and instantly identify how they should approach moving around in it. You figure out which objects are climbable and when to run along sheer cliff walls to get to the next area without having someone yelling in your ear. I like the climbing mechanics because they feel so appropriate for this kind of game. I've seen stuff like alternating buttons to climb before in Bulletstorm, and I hated it there because it just felt like a thing to do in a video game. But it's way more important in Jusant because it's the main method of interacting with the game world. You can even see your character shift their weight to account for moments where you have to move either left or right, and both hands are using the same handhold so that you can reach out as far as you can to get to the next grip. This game got me to stop and think about how we take for granted climbing ladders works in other games. In most games, all we have to do is push a button, and move the left stick to get the character to climb up a ladder. But climbing ladders in Jusant is just as involved a process as climbing along a path of handholds. Try Jusant's demo. It's a good game to play while having music or a podcast blasting in the background, but I also recommend immersing yourself in the atmosphere and enjoying the solitude. There are still more showcases coming out, and I hope to see more demos along with them that grab my attention like these two did.